Hyperion by Dan Simmons. This was a great book. I'll tell you about it right now. So Hyperion by Dan Simmons. This will be a spoiler-free and spoiler reviews. My spoiler-free review is just going to be talking about why I liked it, and my spoiler review is going to be going through each character. And wow, I really did love this book quite a bit. I enjoyed it a lot. It was my third favorite sci-fi September read, second favorite if you don't count Dune. Now this book was about 7 pilgrimage people who are going to the Shrike pilgrimage. Shrike is a church. They worship this cool monster. He's pretty cool. I like him. And I like the Shrike. That's like the coolest part of the book. This is a blend of a perfect mix of religion, science fiction, war, grimdark. This gets pretty dark, honestly. And it really handled it really well. I loved all the characters. You each got to know all their backstories. You each get to know everyone's backstories. And you get to go deep into it. And wow. And this is great. I had so much fun with the backstories, especially this blend of the science fiction is so great. And this is not the best book I've ever read, but this is science fiction's best. I love this book. And now I want to read Fall of Hyperion, like a lot. And this is just really good because every character story put them right where they need to go, like right why they're here. Like you're like, okay, now he's gonna need to go to Hyperion. Oh, and that's why they're here. And every character story was super interesting. I loved this book. It's really thick. It is really juicy. You get to know a lot. The Sea of Grass is one of my favorite parts of this book. That's the Sea of Grass. And this is a great science fiction world. You get to hear more from a long time ago, and it's so funny. One thing I noticed that science fiction does a lot is it's like, oh, this is an ancient thing. When science fiction authors want to use something modern, let's just say like a telephone. Like, oh, there's this ancient thing called a telephone. Let's use they explore the ancient thing, which I feel like is hilarious. And this is done in this book. And I really liked this book. I really enjoyed it. It's also very dark. I read some very dark. This is some very dark stuff right here. But I did really, really enjoy it. Now, if you should read it, definitely. If you are looking for science fiction, some of the best science fiction, these characters, I did not expect this to be a character-heavy book, but it was by a long. It was a very character-heavy book. He was really good at it. It was really good at action-packed. It had some action. It had some really deep thinking of science fiction. I feel like this is one of the best balanced of science fiction books I've ever read. I feel like just action-heavy science fiction is really not it's good. I'm not going to say it's bad action-heavy science fiction. You can make some good action-heavy science fiction. But science fiction is about exploring themes. This has the perfect themes explored, especially with the religion, especially the first story, heavy on religion, I thought. Best themes. And it also had some good action, great fight scenes, great characters, and great book in general, great writing. So everything about this book, I think, was one of the most well-balanced books I've ever read. So this has a great deal of everything. I can't say what it's lackluster on is kind of the gripping. I saw this was a great book, but I wasn't compelled to read I must know what happens next. Even though it was very interesting, I really enjoyed when I did read it. I didn't feel okay, I can't put this book down like I did with some other books, but I don't think that's the beauty of this book. I think the beauty of this book is reading it and seeing what it has to show you, because it's very, very epic. It's big. This came out a little bit before Star Wars, but I would not say this. Only one story I feel started has a Star Wars theme, but other than that, I wouldn't say this is a Star Wars ripped this off. I would say this is a completely different on its own from other science fictions, and I had a really fun time. Now let's get into spoilers. For my spoiler review, I'm going to be talking about each of the 7 characters, and yeah, this is my spoiler-free review in 3, 2, 1. Sorry. The spoiler-free review. The spoiler-free review is over. Hello, people who read this book. I love this book. And the first person I'm going into is the priest. Now, actually, the priest was my favorite story. The first one was my favorite. And this was the priest. This is Leonard Hoyt, but he tells the story of another man, which is common, which happens twice in this book. But the priest, I love the priest. That was my favorite story. Just how the themes were shaking. The cruciform, I had expected like if you belong to the cruciform, these new aliens, alien race, which he finds are really like stupid in some ways, but really smart in some ways. And like how the people die and then they just come back as like living zombies, which is technically immortality, but this sounds awful. And the priest kind of gets like tortured and he dies. I'm like, wow, this was the one that made me think the most. This explored super, super, super heavy themes, and this had like that was one of my favorite parts of that. Like the priest section was so scary, and this whole thing with the time tombs were like insane, and it made me scared, but also really interested in what happens next. Wow, I had so much fun with this book, and this was really just like it made me think a lot. I thought way more than I thought I would think because it has theme heavy, character heavy, action heavy, and it's very epic. I don't know how you can have all of those in a perfect balance, but that's what it does. And this explores the best themes. And like when the priest's friends like kind of wakes up dead, that actually legitimately scared me. Like this is good, like has horror elements. I wouldn't say it's near a horror book, but I was scared. So again, the priest was my favorite section of this book. And I'm not like this is perfect. I really think the priest story really interests me and explores religion. He was Catholic, and they said you belong to the cruciform, but he doesn't. And then they put the cross in his chest. And how these people view their religion is so interesting when it's also very realistic. I love the priest story, and it makes you want to read it. And then you're like, okay, and then what happened next? Because then he dies. And then, like, the other priest kind of finds him. And then it's like, oh, then he's going to go to kind of discover that and help him. And that was really interesting. The soldier, Kassad, he was my least favorite. This is, like, I would say it's the most Star Wars-esque because it had the space fight at the end. And it was okay. I think it was a little weird. He kind of, like, he's hanging out with this lady, which she was really weird. And then, and it was just, like, confusing to me, even though I understood what's happening, but I just didn't understand why. And I didn't really follow it, even though I did understand it was really good. And I really just liked the fight scenes. It was a good fight scene. But other than that, I really didn't care for Kassad as much as people do. I thought Kassad was okay, like, in the present, or in the non-tense thing. But I just didn't really understand in his story. And his story made me at least want to know what happens next, what happens next. But Kassad, he was okay. The poet was also very interesting. Like, the poet is kind of like a slave, or he's kind of like taken from his world to be a slave. And then, like, he kind of gets picked up, and then he writes a story, which the story is like, boom, it kind of like blows up. Which whenever, like, he had like a seizure and he can only talk, that was so funny. Like whenever he can only say a couple words, and I just couldn't stop laughing, like, the whole time. And you know what I mean if you read the book. But that was hilarious. And the poet, and then he kind of, like, writes his dying earth series, like 10 novels, 10 volumes, I'm pretty sure, but he actually wants to write a good poetry. And his poetry book only, like, he sold, like, terrible copy, like, it was so terrible, but he's kind of forced to do the dying earth. And then, like, the ending with, like, kind of like the strike and, like, the threatened, with the sad King Billy. Ooh, that one was like, I was confused. I was like shocked, confused. I was like, oh, this is so cool. But I had a lot of fun with that one. And I was like, I really liked this a lot better than the soldier story, and not as much as the priest story. But I really, really just had a fun time with this one. I was like, oh, like, this is all happening. And it was good. I liked this part of the book. A scholar, Saul Weintraub. Saul Weintraub was pretty cool. And, like, the whole reverse aging thing was really cool. His daughter goes to study the time tombs, and, like, the time tombs make her reverse age. And that's, like, a weird disease, but, like, it explores what will happen, and it explores how sad he is when his daughter doesn't remember anything. He doesn't remember something anymore. How confused she is. And that, like, that was very interesting, and I had a lot of like thoughts on that, because like how, like, what pain he must have been going through, and especially when his wife dies, and you feel for Saul Weintraub, and Saul Weintraub. I think this was my second favorite, I'm pretty sure, out of all the stories. Saul Weintraub had a great part of this, and I really just did enjoy it. I give Saul Weintraub's 10 out of 10, Priest's 10 out of 10, just because how much it makes you think and how much it gets feelings out of me. Even if they're not positive, if a book gets feelings out of me, unless it's overwhelmingly negative, it's usually a good thing. Captain, I'm just going to say it, he kind of disappears. I'm not going to talk about it because, like, you know nothing about the Starship Captain, which is a bummer because I really wanted to. But yeah, there's no Starship Captain. The Detective was a really cool story. It kind of felt like a 60s detective story with the android, which is his name. The android is named... The android is named Johnny, and there's an android, and it's going to feel like a detective story because she's the detective. And that was it was cool. I liked that part, but I just really wouldn't say it stood out. It was kind of like a sci-fi detective story, and it kind of leads them to Hyperion with the time tombs, and it was cool. I liked the characters, and I liked the fight scenes, and Johnny was pretty cool. It's funny how, like, human he is. Like, these robots, these androids are human. He was, like, kind of made after the poet John Keats, which I'm not familiar with, but he was kind of, like, based off of him. It's funny how, like, Dan Simmons has our history in their future, which is really cool. We just have to see how far this spans out. And the last one is the console story, because it was kind of building up to the console story. I feel like it was pretty disappointing and lackluster. He told the story of Ceres Rebellion, which I was like, okay, I feel like this is the most anticlimactic. But other than that, it was good. I had fun. It's just I feel like they were building up to this the whole story. And I feel like there needs to be another, like, a more impactful ending. But that's okay, because I'm ready for the fall of Hyperion, which concludes these characters' stories, which I'm super excited for. Now that we know their backstories, now that I know what they want, they're each going to probably get it in the hype because they're in the Shrike Pilgrimage. And that is going to be epic. I'm planning to get to it in November. And super excited for this. I don't see how this can go wrong. Hyperion was a great novel, 10 out of 10, and I just love the touch of them singing The Wizard of Oz at the end, and it was a good touch, and I like it. So that was my review for Hyperion by Dan Simmons. But yep, see you guys in the next video. Peace.